Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 196 of Speaking from the Heart. Today we have Laura Westman joining us, and Laura is a credentialed coach with the PCC, ontological leadership trainer, a musician and songwriter, an improviser, an author, a co-host of the Rest of Wonderland podcast, and host of the Creativity broadcast on YouTube. She's a total fiend for all things magical that feel like they are quote-unquote off limits in adulthood. She believes that for many of us, they actually crack the code to adulthood. She's infinitely curious about who you have to become to let your dreams become reality. She believes everyone deserves to feel a passionate sense of creating joy and magic. And her philosophy is that creativity is how we connect with ourselves, the deepest kind of magic of all. Now, there's certainly been sorcerers, magicians, and other types of individuals that I have had on the show. But being that Laura is a professionally credentialed coach, a PCC for that matter, has really enlightened me in today's conversation that I have with her. Because it isn't just about the podcasting. It isn't just about what we are dealing with in this broad world, especially when we look at the ways and the modalities in which we execute on our gifts. It means understanding how we can create engagement, how we can create avenues of success by simply getting out of our heads. That's where the magic really begins. And Laura really discusses how she got started with this, how she was able to influence her whole circle to be able to be influenced by others, to then be able to become much better, not only as an individual, but also to allow her improv, her creative juices to be able to become more curious. Sound familiar? Curiosity is something that has been a constant vein in many of our guests, but here's yet another example of somebody that has taken the same steps, even as your podcast host, to create something out of nothing. And I think that's really the key. If you're curious enough and you're passionate enough to use your magic to do better, to do good, nothing is impossible. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Laura Westman. Laura, thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
Raj, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Again, I gotta say, I love my guests. You're getting me one step closer to that all-important episode 200. So thanks for being part of this experience.
Yes, that's such a huge milestone, 200.
I know you relate because being a podcast host yourself, you get it.
Yeah.
You know that's like a big deal for people like us.
It really is. I think for us at West of Wonderland podcast, when we hit 150 episodes, because we release one per week, and when we hit 150, we were like, oh my gosh, who are these super consistent, organized women running this? Where did they come from? We're very proud of ourselves.
But that's something to be proud of, especially because I've been on other podcasts with other women that have celebrated that too. And I'm always enthused by people that are consistent about it. And that's the big thing about being in podcasting is that you got to be consistent.
Mhm.
So speaking of consistency, you're a coach. I already let the listeners know a little bit about your background. The difference about you, though, is that you are credentialed. That's a big deal. So I wonder if you could walk us through a little bit of what your origin story is of, first off, getting interested in coaching, but secondly, taking that extra step, which is something I'm trying to do as well, to become credentialed as well. So I wonder if you can share a little bit of that backstory for us.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So I've been a coach since 2012, and that was a time where I don't really know a lot of people who knew what coaching was in 2012. It's much more popular now. So it's a very different landscape. I was just a couple of years out of college. I had my bachelor's degree in political science, which I think you also have, right?
Yes, I do. And for my listeners, I know you can't see it, but I'm repping my Alvernia University shirt, which actually says Alvernia College, because when I went to school, it started as a college and then it turned into a university.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
What a transformation.
It is such a transformation too. So Yes, I love my poli-sci. Dr. Williams, if you're listening to this, I'm saying hello. But
Oh, that's
anyways, yes.
awesome. Yeah, so I was living in Washington, D.C. I got my bachelor's in political science from the George Washington University, and I had done my congressional internship. And as much as I was very passionate about politics and making a difference, I could tell there was something about the work environments related to politics that were not quite right for me. And so I think in those kind of exploratory years, I was just making money the ways that I knew how to. I was working full time as a specialty barista, and I was also teaching intro to improv at Washington Improv Theater. And it's actually improv that got me curious about coaching because I would teach these intro classes. Intro to improv is kind of the best because it's sort of like kindergarten for adults. You have all these people show up and they're awkward, but they're open. They're used to being in professional environments with other adults, but they're here to play. And so there's this optimism and this awkwardness and this kind of holding back, you know? And then at the end of the class, these people are different. They know how to play again. And there's a joy and there's a sense of team and togetherness. And the people who walked into that first class are not the people walking out. And I loved the transformation and I loved watching the joy return. And I asked a lot of questions about like, how else can I be part of that kind of transformation? And it turns out, surprise, surprise, there's not a ton of great career paths in teaching intro to improv unless you do what I did, which is kind of make your own. And I just got really curious about support professions. I met someone through the improv community who was actually in training to be a coach at the time. One thing led to another. Whoopsie, I'm becoming a coach. That's what happened.
I have to stop you there for a second because I hear you about the improv stuff. I started doing that a little bit. I went through 2 different levels at my local improv community, which, by the way, I'll give a shout out to the Harrisburg Improv Theater. Jake, who owns that, was somebody that was really talented, really knowledgeable, still runs that, but they have been really gifted in terms of helping other people go through and learn so much about, like you're saying, bring the fun out. And
Mhm.
I didn't know how to have fun until I took those 2 levels. I didn't move on to the 3rd level. There was other levels. Some of my classmates did, but it's such a rewarding experience. So I love doing that. And that's what's really appealing too about your story that I loved is that you were involved with that. But I didn't mean to interrupt. I
Thanks.
had to throw that shout out.
Yeah, no, I mean, improv is a very special kind of art form and it's usable in so many different ways. I think part of what's been really cool about becoming a coach and a leadership trainer, as well as an improviser and an improv instructor, is I've really enjoyed getting to kind of cross pollinate these two things with each other and see what can happen and how they can feed each other. So, just as an example, I was at the Hartford Improv Festival in Hartford, Connecticut, at this awesome theater called CT Improv Theater and Comedy Theater, actually. And I taught a workshop that when I came up with the idea for it, I was like, am I crazy? Is this weird? But I think one of the things I've learned about having a voice in my business and kind of owning my particular corner of the sky as a coach, which I know this is an area you really are passionate about too. I've kind of learned that the weirder seeming the idea, the more me it is, usually, and therefore the more resonant it's going to be with the people I'm trying to reach. So I came up with this idea that was just called Get Out of Your Head in Long Form Improv. And you know what? It was freaking awesome. It was a sold out workshop, which surprised me because I didn't know anyone in that community. So I was like, oh, I guess the topic really resonates with people. And it was like one part vulnerable group coaching debrief about where's our attention when we're playing, when it's not on the fun. And then I got to do a couple of hours of exercises and getting back into our bodies and becoming silly again. And man, it was awesome.
Do you find, especially doing workshops like that, was that your first time? First off, it seems like to me you've done a number of these types of workshops in the past.
It was my first time delivering that workshop, but I've been doing group work for a very long time.
Yeah. And I imagine, especially with the number of years you've had, that it has given you a perspective of what are some of the things that you can work or things that weren't working as well. Do you find that with doing things such as getting people on their feet, engaging, trying to help them figure out what their specific niche is, do you find that to be more empowering than say, okay, everybody, we're going to go through the same exercise together? Because I've seen traditional workshops do that and I'm like, ugh. I'm like, I want to vomit because it's always the same thing over and over again. We're not tailoring it to who our clients are. And that's a big
Mhm.
deal to me with my coaching business. I try to do that, asking questions of who my audience is. What is it that I'm trying to present? I tell my public speaking clients that all the time is your story should be aligned with what it is that you're presenting it to. But they have those messages already built out, but they can go in many different types of directions depending on what it is.
Mhm.
I was wondering if you kind of do the same essentially.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said for delivering ideas and material in traditional ways. I'm not going to disparage it, but I feel like my philosophy when it comes to professional development is like, why would you do it boringly when you could actually do it in a way that's very fun and interactive and make it very enrolling for people to participate? To me, that's one of the big differences is you can attend a seminar. I don't know about you. I'm always checking out when I attend things. If all we're doing
Oh,
is sitting there,
oh, I'll
no,
tell you. I'll
no.
tell you. And I know it sounds a little cheesy and you probably will frown upon it, but I always look at what other coaches are doing. I look at what their topic is, what they're presenting, and how they're achieving their objectives. Because sometimes I look at some of them like, wait, the title of this doesn't match what you're trying to do in terms of your objectives. This wasn't thought through. And it gives me inspiration of, well, what can I present not taking what they have, because obviously that's their original work. I
Mhm,
don't believe in stealing other people's stuff. I believe in what can we do to make this better? What can we do to make it a much improved process so we can have people learn a lot of it? So that's why I like doing that. I like seeing what people have to offer as opposed to saying, oh, I'm going to take this, I'm going to use it. Because you can tell right away if someone's reading off of something or they are manufacturing it, it's not their stuff.
yeah, and that sucks. Actually, you asked me earlier about credentialing. I realized I didn't really talk about it, but
No, I was gonna circle back to it. Go
okay.
for it.
Yeah, well, that's actually part of the code of ethics at the International Coach Federation among professional coaches is if you're using something that is actually from another coach, get permission and also attribute. It's pretty important. And I think it also contributes to a more positive and collaborative community. I think it also says that there's enough business for everyone, that we can share ideas, and that we're not trying to sound like the smartest coach of all the time. We can credit other people. In fact, we should.
You sound like to me the younger version of me when I was starting this. I was thinking the same thing. So here's the deal. I felt like I met my doppelganger several episodes ago, but now you are like the female version of me.
Wait, so what are you
Well,
hearing? Yeah, tell
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. So here, let me just recap it for my listeners that haven't been paying attention. Political science, we have that in common.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you've done improv. So I've done improv too. So we got that checkbox. You have the goal in mind of helping people wherever they are at with figuring out what problem solution that they're trying to solve by checking off the boxes of this is what I want to do. This is what will help them. You've done that. The only things that we're not aligned with right now is that I haven't had the number of years that you have, which I'm a little baby coach. I'm entering into my third year. But also at the same time, you have gotten something that makes a lot of sense that most people do. Get credentialed. An international coaching federation was something that I was looking at doing myself and getting that as a basis of many other avenues that I want to dive into. But why do you feel that getting credentialed was important for your practice, Laura?
Like, there's a lot of benefits both to your personal practice and your sense of well-being as a practitioner of coaching and a business owner to getting credentialed. For me, I was also on the advanced leadership track at my coach training company. And so part of what was important there was really taking on and embodying, hey, this is what a professional coach can really do and can really become. I will say that I became a PCC, professional certified coach, when the hours requirement was much higher than it is now. And I always feel silly talking about it, but it does make me sort of feel like I'm one of those guys who's like, back in the day, we walked uphill in the snow to school both ways, kind of what it feels like. But it's true. We had to really kind of claw our way to the PCC credential. And I've now renewed a number of times since then. And I think there's a couple of benefits. One is the market of coaching is much more saturated than it was when I began. Like I said earlier, when I started coaching, I had to explain it to everyone. And I was very young. So you can imagine it was hard to get hired at first. I have a baby face in general. So imagine this, but like 12 years ago, just wind back the clock.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but it looked like you're 21 years
I
old.
know.
So it's okay.
I mean,
It's
thank you.
okay.
I receive it as a compliment. I'm actually 36 and I've been doing this a long time, but like I do have a baby face, and
Now, when this episode comes out, I will be on the eve of my 38th birthday. So, Laura, I feel like I'm
oh,
in great company knowing that we're in the same age bracket. But
yeah,
even then, like I look at some of my colleagues, and I'm sure you do the same thing. They're like, oh, they're 45, they're 50, they're 55. They're much more advanced than me. I sometimes have that imposter syndrome of like, I'm not good enough because of my age. I don't know if you experience that, but I do.
I definitely did back in the day, especially because in the coaching industry, again, it's very different now, very different landscape. But at the time, I was not only on the younger end, but I was also female. And the origins of the coaching industry, coaching actually began as a way for affluent, successful white men to help each other become better and become more affluent and successful, just like that. So it kind of had its origins in entrepreneurship. I mean, this is very reductive. I want to answer your question about credentialing, but I also am a really big nerd about the coaching industry in general. So I could talk to you about this forever. But the point I'm trying to make is that one of the things that's great about the credential is that there's a lot of people out there who are calling themselves a coach that haven't had practice or training or oversight. And I think it's awesome that we live in a world where so many people can help each other. I never want to sound like I want to discourage people from striking out on their own, growing a business, and serving people, because that's to me what the world is made of. And when you're soliciting opportunities, when you're trying to get hired, having a credential really builds a lot of credibility in the market. But the other thing that's great about it is you renew your credential every 3 years, which sometimes feels kind of like a headache because you're like, one more thing to do. But what's great is they actually have you take continuing education courses, and we call them credits. And you do a refresher of the ethics course every time. And I don't know, it's just a really nice way to kind of keep yourself engaged in your development as a professional. I will also say, along those lines, one other thing that has been really crucial for my success and my development is having my own coach that whole time. So there's sometimes when that coach is providing mentorship, sometimes when they're providing feedback. I worked with a really great master certified coach. Actually, I worked with a few of them over the years, but in particular, the most recent one runs this really awesome continuing ed program called the Essence of Mastery Summit. And she's an MCC and she's really passionate about master level coaching. And so it's this wonderful, nerdy event that she hosts every year to just be in conversation with other coaches about what coaching mastery even is and providing feedback and support. Because I'm sure, as you know firsthand, being a coach requires a really good amount of reflective work so that you're actually able to clear your own stuff out of the way and go be over there with the client. It's what makes coaching valuable and, like, I think better than just shooting the shit with your buddies over beer talking about your business. There's a reason why people hire us, you know?
There there's 2 things that you say to that I think is really significant. First off, that's mainly one of the reasons I do a podcast and why I think you do yours is that it gives us an opportunity to use what we have practiced and putting it into interviews, but vice versa, what we get out of interviews, what we get out of what we develop as content for our audience,
Mhm,
we're able to put back into the practice.
mhm,
So people like you, as I even approached number 200, I know we were talking about all the things that you have been able to do because of the certification. I feel like this is my continuing education, my credits, if you will, doing this. That's to say, though, that I continue to work on things even as a personal individual. And I even share that with my clients too, is that Yeah, I'm not a therapist. I truly make that disclaimer even anything that I do. But the biggest thing is I'm here as accountability. I'm helping you to think things through that you might have not thought otherwise. My job is to separate what I got going on and to put my undivided attention into what you're doing.
Yes.
So I think it's so important for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes it's harder on some days over others. Absolutely.
Totally. Totally. And I think it's part of why having colleagues and other coaches that you're in community with is so helpful. I can't tell you how many times over the years have I been staring at my calendar and going through something hard and being like, how am I going to coach all these people today? I can't even make my breakfast or whatever. And then when you have people who kind of have your back and you have practices to kind of bring yourself back, there are some times when I've been going through hard times when, man, the only thing that kept me going was showing up for clients. And it's so great because you kind of just leave all your own stuff at the door for a while, go in there and be with them. It's a lot like improv practice, to be honest. I love it.
You're in your element essentially as a
Yeah.
result of that. Absolutely.
And you're being of service and you're over there with them instead of swirling in your own abyss.
It is. It's almost the murkiness that sometimes we go through, especially if we are even using our own tools, which is a big deal for me. If I'm going to put my clients through something that I want them to practice, I'm going to put myself through that too. And I think even early on, one of the biggest lessons I learned is to make sure that even when I learn something from it, be able to put that into practice so that I can share that, say, hey, you know what? I made a mistake and it's okay to make those mistakes just to be able to correct yourself, be able to make that accountability happen. But
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect segue into the book that you have written. And I want to let our listeners know, I'll put this in the episode notes as well. The title of it is How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise, Clear Out the Clutter and Get into Your Flow for a Fulfilling, Passionate Life. You're a coach. You've done this for over a decade now. You have worked on things that people that are just starting out, the baby ones like me, are like, oh my gosh, I want to do this too. I know you've written this, it will be over 2 years ago when this episode airs. Tell us a little bit about why it's so important for us to get those creative juices going, especially when it comes to practicing what we want to do, what we want to have in terms of preaching that goal that we have or something that we really wanted to achieve. From my perspective, Laura, from what I've heard so far, the improv aspect of it, the reason for having that creativity, we haven't even talked about you being a songwriter and things like that. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One part of my story that is, it's a pretty important part of my journey. And it's in the book because it's part of my creative story. But I grew up being a very creative kid. I was always making something, always coming up with a dance or a song. When I was 12, I starred in our production of Annie at summer camp. So I was like, I'm headed for Broadway. I'm really going somewhere. And then when I was maybe 17, I don't know, it's hard to remember exactly when, but I started losing my voice a lot, like my physical voice. And I went to the doctor, the ENT. Have you ever been to an ENT?
I am not, but I know other people that have.
I mean, bless them. We need them. But a lot of what the ENTs have to start with is they put a camera up your nose and down your throat. Yeah, it's not great.
Oh, yes. It's probably what you do too when they're shoving a camera up your nose.
All you can do is like practice box breathing and just like sit and wait, try not to panic. But I found out from that visit that I had developed pretty debilitating vocal nodules on my vocal cords. And at the time, my interpretation of that was that my performing arts career was dead in the water and I would have no future and never be able to sing again, which was devastating. And that's how I ended up with my political science degree instead of a theater degree, was thinking that
You made the right decision, by the way. Political science, us kids, we like to be liberal, arts-oriented, creative.
we are
You made the
kind of
right
cool, I
decision.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
And it was a very pure part of me that pursued that. I love that part of me. But I sort of felt this feeling of like, oh, I've always been at home on the stage. I've always been at home with this, but it's not for me anymore. And so I kind of proverbially took my ball and went home. I got my political science degree. I didn't audition for things anymore. I did some student theater in college because I thought I was good enough for that. Nothing main stage, but student theater. Thank God for student theater. And that's also how I got into improv. Part of it was I wanted something to kind of get me outside of my comfort zone, and nothing will do it like improv will do it. You know what I mean? But honestly, I think part of why I got so involved in it and got on improv teams and started teaching was because improv didn't rely on a consistent vocal performance. However I was that day would just be part of the show. And so those years between the beginning of college and pretty much until my late 20s, I was basically pretending like I had never had creative dreams. Just pretending, because it was very painful to even think about. It was painful. It was like a loss, a really big loss. Plus the element of not being able to use my voice. Like there were a lot of times when speaking or singing was painful for me in a way that it wasn't for other people. And the reason that I'm saying all of this is because my creative self just wouldn't leave me alone. I was a couple of years into coaching, and I found myself mostly interested in coaching people on their creative projects, on their creative dreams, on their visions for their creative life. That kind of thing rubs off on you. And I remember this moment. Cody, who is my husband now, who's my boyfriend at the time, he surprised me one Christmas with an electronic keyboard because it was all we could really manage at our tiny New York City apartment. And I remember unwrapping it and crying and just feeling so seen. Like it was something that I couldn't even admit I wanted, but like, he knew it was so obvious, like obviously. And around that time, I had this conversation with my coach where I just remember saying to her very softly, how sometimes in coaching we're like, this is what I want and I'm going for it. This was not that. This was more like a quiet admitting of like, wow, I think it's actually time for me to return to dreams that I had for myself as a little girl. And there was something about that came out of me. And I was like, yeah, let's follow it and follow it and follow it. And it's almost like holding an end of a rope, and just like continuing to let it lead you somewhere and you don't really know where it's going. But when we follow that part of us, that's creative, we're curious about it, we're getting into that flow, it does allow things in our life to move. It allows us to feel brilliant and smart. And for me in particular, when I started letting more of my creativity out, the more it wanted to come out. One of the things I'm doing in my business right now is I have a lot of courses about creativity, actually. And I have this one that's a workshop I ran recently, and it's called Money and Creativity, a Love Story. And it's that same idea of like, wow, if we look at this area of life, money, that's so confronting and it has all of this energy on it for so many people. What if we're actually able to bring our creative power and our brilliance and like that part of us that's alive and free and set it loose on this other area of life? And it's why this part of my business, my course business, is all around creativity, because I live every day the effects of having shut it down and then opened it up again. And I'm well again. I have a clean bill of health from my ENT, Yeah. And I'm sort of skipping over the very challenging, long recovery, both of my voice, but also just my creative spirit. It takes something to wake that part of you back up again when you've kind of tamped it down. But I just think that people in general are happier when their creativity is alive and active and doing things. I think that the people around us have more fun. I think that in our leadership, especially if we're business owners or managers or whatever, when we actually lead with some more creativity, it engages people. To the point of our conversation earlier, like if you have a presentation and there's like this roteness to how you deliver it, if you infuse it with just a little bit of your creativity, it's going to change the whole thing and people will feel it.
They will feel the excitement. They will know that you really are vested in what you're presenting. They almost
Yeah,
sense that they want to be part of it just because you are excited about it.
right.
They want to have that. Laura, we're almost at the end of our time. I want to ask one last question because I think it's so, so important for my listeners to hear this because you said something that is truly profound that many of my previous guests have talked about how they've been able to create this, but we haven't really handled this question head on. So I'm going to give you first shot essentially today, being able to answer this. And you talked about waking up or creativity. That's the essence that you've just said. As somebody that is a coach that has worked on this for many years, working on yourself physically, written books about this, being able to address this head on in a variety of different mediums, what is it that we're missing today in order for us, the common person, Joe, Jane, whatever, to help us be creative? What do you think is that essence that we need to unlock to just get that process started?
I think it's a lot simpler than we think. My opinion is the thing we often need is actually a curiosity. One of my philosophies in general about creativity is that our creativity is often a much more vulnerable part of us than we like to admit. And so it's best if we're trying to wake it back up to think about it like we might a little kitten or something. Yeah. And it's better to think about it like from a curiosity perspective, not of like, how do I get my kitten to come out? That's not going to work. We actually need to think about it more like, okay, let's imagine the kitten's active. What's it doing? And being curious about that and following where it's already flowing. I will also say, I wrote a guide specifically for this called Uncover Your Creative Magic. That kind of, it's like a methodical kind of step by step to open up that curiosity and get back into it. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that.
I sense that passion. It's something that, especially in the ebbs and flows of life, which even when things happen, we figure out what's the path of least resistance that we can get onto. But I think that sometimes that path of least resistance isn't the path that we should be choosing. It's not challenging us. Sometimes we need to have that challenge so that we can find that growth. We can find that mindset to experience things that will challenge that status quo. Creativity is just one of those facets. And I love that your story intertwines with it so much. And, there's so much that we didn't even cover. The fact that you have your own YouTube channel when it comes to this and talking about that, being passionate about some of the ways in which we can create that dynamicism in our lives. I appreciate so much you sharing all these things today, Laura. I want to give you the last few minutes before we wrap up, though, to let our audience know how can they get in touch with you. Maybe they're interested in coaching from you because I know you are obviously a certified credentialed coach. As we talked about that today. How can people do that? How can they follow your podcast? How can they get your book? Man, you've done everything that I know one day I'm going to accomplish as well. Why don't you let some people know, though, if they're interested, how they can achieve all of that with you? I'll give you last
Absolutely.
minutes.
Thank you. You can find my free guide, Uncover Your Creative Magic, at www.laurawestman.com/uncover. And it's delightful. It's free. Actually, a treasure map. So yeah, it's quite cool.
X marks the spot.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, in the spirit of infusing everything that you are presenting with creativity, I follow that practice myself. So please enjoy. You can also get in touch with me through my website at www.laurawestman.com. I'm also really active on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is at WestyGrammed because back in the day when Instagram started, it was funny to put your name and then Grammed, and I just had never changed it. And Westy was my nickname at the coffee shop. So it's at Westy Grammed. My YouTube channel is called The Creativity Broadcast, and I've got lots of different cool things there just oriented toward waking up your creativity and keeping it alive. I have journal with me videos. I have tutorials like how to bring more creativity to your boring job or how to get your team to be more creative. But I also interview people who are resources for creatives, like self-publishing book coaches and that kind of thing. One other thing I really want to share with all of you is my podcast, West of Wonderland podcast, which I run with my coaching bestie. Her name's Bay. And it's all about coaching. And she's also a former coach trainer. So we're like really nerdy about coaching. And we talk about it on the podcast through the lens of what I will refer to affectionately as magical media. And we run little ad hoc trainings for coaches based on some of the conversations that come up on the podcast. We recently ran this workshop that I'm totally obsessed with, which is called the theme park map of your business. So we did some creative business mapping with a bunch of solopreneurs, and that's maybe my finest hour is that workshop. That's pretty cool. And yeah, it's West of Wonderland podcast. And if you want to learn more about that, you can find us on all the podcasting platforms, or you can go to laurawestman.com/wow-academy, and you'll get to see all the stuff that we're cooking up over there.
I will put all of that in the episode notes and so much more, including the free 8-step guide that you have even mentioned. So if you want to click on that, you can get access to it. Laura, you are somebody that I even said to you before we started this recording about really want to be like you. End of story. I have this limiting belief right now that I have to have this job working 9 to 5, thinking that that's going to get me to where my dreams are. That is not true whatsoever. This is where my passion is. And what I find to be very unique about your story, unlike other coaches I've had on the show, is that you're teaching other coaches to be more effective in their businesses. You have clients that you're teaching them how to be more creative. Overall, though, I love the fact that you have this passionate heart that stems from a liberal arts education, okay? But maybe you were meant to be the next Taylor Swift, which claim to fame in Pennsylvania. We have her. No one else gets to touch her. But you are a Taylor Swift when it comes to coaching. So let's say that you achieved that, at least that much, okay? I think you have done some amazing things. And I know you're laughing at me. Stop laughing at me.
It's
'Cause
not
I
a
mean
laughing
that.
at, it's a, oh my God, that's the best compliment I've ever received. Thank you. Incredulous look on my
I
face.
I don't need to even have a coaching session with you because here's the deal is that you're creating that environment based on the fact that you want people to succeed. Success in coaching is the ultimate goal. So for you, rallying behind everybody else, thanks, Laura, for being on Speaking from the Heart today. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your story, why this is important for you, and why we should be creative. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being such a stand in your community for conversations from the heart. This is clearly so important. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Again, I want to thank Laura so much for being part of the show, sharing what she has been able to accomplish, and just knowing that there's a fellow coach out there that has really progressed to getting to the point that she's at right now is truly astounding. It has really shined some light on a number of different topics, a number of different things that otherwise would have not been as successful. Because creating this success, podcasting even in itself, can be a very adventurous opportunity for many different individuals like Laura and myself to be able to meet with different people. But even then, the conversation that we had today really unlocks our true potential of what it means to really dig deep, what it means to be really curious. And something about what she had talked about today with improv, coaching, getting exciting with connection, it's something that we should all be feeling. It's all ways in which we can combat loneliness, which we literally talked about in the previous episode. But even then, dealing with loneliness means that we are given opportunity and we are able to use that opportunity to our advantage. And I love that Laura's advantage of being able to create this engagement, this new avenue for creativity, means that she can teach others to do the same. To simply get out of our own head, because how boring is it to do the same things over and over again, thinking that you're going to not only have a different kind of result, not only do you think that something's going to change, but overall, just feeling that you have this engagement in a whole other facet, a whole other way of creating importance can get you in a purpose-driven way and a methodology that would help you to develop yourself and to develop others. Being young, being old, being something in between has no significance to this conversation today, because what is really truly important is how much you really want it. How much do you really want to strive to get that purpose that you always wanted to have? And purpose, especially when you combine it with curiosity, can create credibility. And credibility is the key to unlocking massive potential, not only with others, but also within yourself. Now, you don't necessarily have to be credentialed for every single thing, and even Laura alludes to the fact that even in this industry, being a professionally certified coach is something that might not always occur. But it's nice to know that somebody that you're working with has the skills, has the knowledge, has the training to work with somebody so that they are able to unlock their true potential. Even when the hard times show up for that client's perspective, you know what you can do by showing up, by leaving us as part of this bigger adventure that you're trying to embark on, knowing that somebody knows what the heck they're talking about. And Laura certainly did, especially when it comes to all the things that she even shared about her book, about the things that we do in our bodies, the ways in which we can unlock those limited beliefs to become magic. Because the creative direction that we lead in our lives, these true strengths that we have, means that we have to dig below the surface. And I think Laura's story, along with the ways in which she got to where she is today, really shows how that creative juice, how that energy and that persistence really does pay off. Following that rope, or as another guest had put it, the breadcrumbs, can lead us to that direction. That can lead us to that opportunity to grow overall. Because waking up is our creative ways in which we can explore curiosity. We can find the ways in which we're able to learn how to develop ourselves, whether that's personal, whether that's professional, whether it's about our business, or something else that falls in between the cracks. But ladies and gentlemen, the biggest thing that undertones this whole entire conversation is about the way in which we approach this with our own vulnerability. I had to be pushed, I had to be prodded to be able to get to where I am today. And it wasn't by any sort of secret sauce. It wasn't by a pep talk by some other coach. As many of you know, it was all because of sheer grit, sheer opportunity, wanting to do better, wanting to see what it looks like to get to that side where I know that success can stare at me. But even then, finding the ways in which we can create success, finding that opportunity for direction, means that we have to get off that beaten path, which we've talked about what that path can look like. Even with all the things that you can teach yourself, whether that is working on extemporaneous speaking, whether that is going to improv classes, whether it is unlocking your philosophy or your magic that you have inside yourself, you have to build those pipelines. You have to build those opportunities so that you are able to establish credibility, that you are able to engage with others. Maybe that means that you have to get credentialed. You have to go through the quote unquote process so that other people see your worth and see who you really are. Getting to that other perspective, getting over that hump, if you will, means that we have to break down the significance of what it means to actually do what we're doing, which means that you have to do a lot of soul searching. There has to be a lot of hardship sometimes when you get to that other side, knowing that you are where you are because you put in that hard work. But sometimes that hard work is not easy to do. It's not easy to overcome. It's not easy to establish why you have all these opportunities, all these times in which sometimes you might feel alone. Nobody wants to show up, but yet at the same token, you have to show up for yourself every single day. The health of our bodies, the limited beliefs that we have, means that we have to self-check ourselves so that we know that that juice, that thing that we want to excite, especially inside of ourselves when it comes to the opportunities that are ahead, we have to find what it means to keep on walking that path. And some days that rope runs out. The breadcrumbs stop leaving breadcrumbs. In other words, we have to find our own path, even in the unknown, because it might have never been done before. This is a very abstract concept, but if you think about all the inventions, all the things that have revolutionized our world, it has been able to take a big, giant step forward, not seeing where that path is on the ground, and keep on walking in that direction, hoping that you will discover something new. Even some of our explorers, the people that have founded America and so many other opportunities out in space, had to have that curiosity in which they would be able to be vulnerable and answer to some crimes that some people thought were absolutely crazy. Don't believe me? What about the people that thought that the Earth was flat and it wasn't round? That there was no such thing as gravity, that we were just going to float out into space? How do we find out that we actually needed oxygen so that we could breathe in atmospheres that don't exist outside this Earth, this celestial body, if you will? We needed to have curiosity. We needed to explore the unknown. We also needed to help ourselves get to that right step towards that direction. And trust me, it's not easy some days to do all these things. It's not easy to create these opportunities that we're talking about today. It means that you really have to dig deep. You have to look at all the creative opportunities that do exist, all the leadership training that you could receive, all the right and left sides of your brain that you can use to not only develop this content, means that you have to also appeal to those people as well, which is a whole other ball game in itself. And for my business owners, you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this. Teaching new avenues to be successful means that we have to get out of our own ways. We have to be a little less boring. We have to get credentialed sometimes to showcase that we know exactly what we're talking about. And even when we do those notions, we go through those steps, the hard times always will show up. I think Laura really demonstrates today her passion, her creativity, her excitement as to why she does what she does. And I think that for all of us, we can find our own passions when it relates to those steps, those directions that we need to go towards. So if you're not sure where to go, if you're not sure where to lead yourself towards, if you're not even sure what it looks like to have success, that's where people that have walked this life, that have walked in those directions, can help you find that direction. They can help you find the importance of refreshing yourself, getting over your own hump, getting over the things that might be throwing you away, that might be throwing a wrench into your plans, means that you have to find the rope again. So if you drop that rope somewhere, or if you have refound those breadcrumbs that you've been following, good for you. Those are the things that will help you to get you to where you need to be. But if you're not quite sure where you place that rope or where those breadcrumbs are at, just know that there will always be people along the way that will help you being successful, getting to where you need to go. Because in this world, we're all in this together. No matter what our differences are, no matter what opportunities might present ourselves, whether it's through improv or some other medium, just know that there is always hope, not only for you to be successful, not only for you to share an inspiring message, but to also find the most revolutionary thing that we have inside of ourselves, the magic that unlocks all of those opportunities. Thanks for listening to episode number 196 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.